I can lower them.
Okay, sorry.
Okay, no problem.
So you stay on the line, we'll lower them, and then
I'm sorry?
you can bring them on when you're ready.
Why don't we just keep you on the line, and then I'll bring you up in probably 5-10 minutes. How's that?
All right, that's fine.
Okay.
Okay, he's still on the line, so we're going to start. So ready, guys? Let's do this. All right, 6:30.
Yep.
I'll give you 30 seconds.
No problem.
There you go. Recording 2 different recorders this time, just in case.
Yep.
And you're live.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. You know, for 20 years I've investigated demons, devils, angels, ghosts, fairies, and I spent 10 years doing a radio show with my friend Lou Gentili and my mentor. When Lou died in 2009, I took over running the investigations, and I've been looking ever since to start my own radio show. I would like to welcome you to an event, 8 years in the making now. Welcome to Paranormal Encyclopedia. I want to dedicate this my new show to the memory of my friend both Lou Gentili and Father Joseph Brose. Lou passed in 2009 and Father passed in 2016. Tonight is going to be a pretty basic intro. I've got my co-host here. Say something.
Something.
Okay, so my shy co-host would be author Brian McKinley. My fiance is also sitting in. Hello. That's Amisha Campbell. But I'm here to talk to you guys about my experiences as an investigator and about just how weird things out there can get. We're going to have guests as time goes on. In fact, we've got a friend of mine on the line right now, so we can talk about his upcoming event. But real quick, before I bring him on, since he's being very patient and waiting, let me just explain real quick for those of you who don't know. So I am a demonologist. For those of you who are wondering what the heck that is, it means I investigate haunted houses. But where your traditional ghost hunter goes into a haunted house to try and prove that the house is haunted, I'm the guy who goes in there to figure out, is it haunted? Is what's haunting it a dangerous type of spirit? And if so, what can we do about it? We'll get more into that in a minute, but why don't we bring in Arthur so he can do his plug for his upcoming event and just say a quick hello. He'll be a guest down the road. Arthur, you there?
Yep, hello.
Hello, welcome. Thanks for joining us for my very first episode.
I'm glad to be here. I'm glad you invited me.
So, we can talk real quick about who you are in general in a minute. Why don't you mention your event and when it is and what it is first?
All right. My event is called Crucible. I've been running it since 2003. It is a occult magic convention. It mostly caters to magicians and pagans and anybody else who's interested in magic. Rather than being a religious event, it's really concentrating more on what magic is, how it works, how you can. It's not a fluffy event by any means. It's more a symposium than anything else.
Having been there, it strikes me very much similar to an academic event.
It is, very much so.
Because it's a great event, folks. If anybody's out there who has an interest in that kind of thing, I definitely recommend checking it out. Arthur and I have known each other a number of years now, and at some point in the near future, we just have to figure out a date he's going to be on more properly so we can talk about what he does. You have anything else you want to add, Arthur?
Well, I mean, as far as the event goes, I wanted to mention that if you're interested, go to www.crucibleconvention.com. Mm-hmm. It's in Princeton, at the Winston Princeton Forrestal Village. Today, believe it or not, is the last day or actually tomorrow is the last day for picking up rooms, but the room blocks are sold, but I think they still have rooms as far as the Greater Hotel does. And it's on October 7th is the main day, which is a Saturday. I didn't know if you wanted to get into my background or just wanted to concentrate more on Crucibles.
Probably for today, Crucible's just a logical thing, since it's an introduction. Okay. I've barely gotten in my own background yet.
No, I can appreciate that. As far as Crucible goes, we have 2 tracks. We have 10 speakers, a very eclectic bunch of people, including myself for that matter. There is a banquet dinner, and there's, of course, a pre-party and post party, you know how that one goes. So it gives a lot of a chance to mingle with everybody and talk shop and maybe discover things you never knew existed and talk to people who actually do it on a day-to-day basis. So it's that kind of thing where it's you go to for one particular speaker and then you usually end up staying for everybody else because here's an opportunity to expand your knowledge because it's right there in front of you. So maybe you always wondered about voodoo or the OTO or omnimancy or any number of different things, and now it's all in one spot. And usually the complaint I get is that there's so much going on, they can't go to all of it.
Yeah, that was.
That's what people really enjoy.
One year I was able to make it, and for those who are wondering, I haven't gone since because of time and money constraints. But that was my problem, is it's like there are so many interesting things going on and only so much time to hit them all in. Especially with, it's 2 tracks, so there's something going on the other side. I have to sacrifice one to do the other. But, okay. Thanks for calling in, Arthur. And
No problem. Thank you for having me.
We'll have you on more properly soon.
I hope so. I look forward to it. Thank you.
Have a good night.
You too.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, everybody, I know that was a little bit random. I had actually originally meant to have that slightly later in the show. But I did want to... Arthur, like I said, is a very good friend of mine. I've known him for years. I did want to give him a chance to mention his event. I had hoped to have him on before the event, but unfortunately, we've been booking guests really fast. So why don't I get started by more properly introducing myself and what I do. Now, my mentor, Lou Gentili, had one of the better definitions of the word demonology, I think. I mean, if you look it up in a dictionary, it'll say the study of and the doctrine concerning demons, which is ridiculously vague. I mean, what's a demon? What doctrine am I a Satan worshiper? I'm not a Satan worshiper. Lou used to say that demonology is the study of evil, and that's a little closer to the mark. Like I said, what I do is very similar to what you think of with a ghost hunter or one of those people on all those TV shows out right now. And I go out and document that a house is haunted and figure out what's going on. Now, as you can probably guess by the fact that I keep talking about demons, yes, I'm a Christian. But this is not, and anyone out there who's listening who's going, oh, great, this Christian is going to tell us how we're all going to burn in the fires. I'm not. That's not what this is about. I'm not here to judge your religion. I'm not here to condemn anyone's personal beliefs. Because the reality is I've worked with people of a number of faiths in the last 20 years, and it's not as black and white as many Christians seem to think. I've met very devout and religious people of pagan faiths, of Christian faiths, of Buddhists and things like that. And we're all working towards the common good in the attempt to help people. And that's really what I'm about here. As time goes on, I hope to maybe get a few religious leaders from other faiths on, just for the sake of educating people about some of the other beliefs. And the fact, because this is one of the most common complaints I get as a demonologist, is people are like, well, aren't demons just a Christian thing? Didn't the church just make them up to scare people? And the reality is every religion in the world, every major one, most of the minor ones, has demons of some kind.
That's by another name.
Exactly. You know, if you ask a Muslim, they won't talk about demons per se because they don't believe in fallen angels, but they'll talk about jinn. If you ask a Jew, they generally don't believe in fallen angels either, but they talk about the Dybbuk, they talk about the Shidduch, and even some Jews have an idea of fallen angels. But Hindus have Rashakas and other types of beings that fill this role. It's not a uniquely Christian thing. And when I talk about demons, I'm talking about a malevolent spirit that is actively trying to harm someone. Now, I have a lot of friends, like Arthur and I have had this discussion more than once, who will go, well, how do you know it's a demon in the fallen angel sense, which is what I believe they are, and I'll get into some other options on that in a minute, as opposed to a malevolent fairy or an elemental or just a really angry human spirit. And the thing is, for me, I really don't care. I'm a really practical guy about this kind of thing. If there is I'm concerned with three questions. Is there a spirit in the house? Because the reality is, for me and every other investigator I know, we get lots of calls where the house isn't haunted. The person has an overactive imagination. The person's mentally ill. There's some weird natural phenomenon going on, whether it be raccoons living in the floorboards or their dogs are hyperactive, broken fans in their bathroom. These are all taken from real cases, by the way. I'm not just making these up. The next question I have is, if the house is haunted, is what's there a danger? If a person wakes up at 2 o'clock in the morning every night, hears footsteps start at the back bedroom, walk down the hallway, walk down the stairs, open the door, walk out the door, and shut the door, and that's all that ever happens, I'm not going to say that, maybe they have a demon. I don't know, but it's a really well-behaved demon.
It's a demon with places to go.
Yeah.
So it's got other things to do.
You think you're my only priority?
Yeah, exactly.
He was like, what? The world doesn't revolve around you.
On the other hand, if the person's living in a hotel room because they're so afraid they don't want to go home, or if the person's pushed to the point where they put a gun in their mouth and pull the trigger, and yeah, that's a case I did. There's something wrong here, and something needs to be done about it. And that would be the third question: is if it is a threat, what are we going to do about it? And once you have a problem, what's causing the problem is secondary to how to fix it, in my opinion. A theologian can sit and argue about, well, is it really a demon or is it this other thing? I don't care. I am not a scientist in a lab coat with a tape measure trying to figure out, does this make you a happy and well-adjusted demon when you throw dishes at the person's head? It's show you the door, and then we can debate the theology of it later. Now, it is a somewhat interesting question, and I think worth discussing what the word demon means and what, the origins of the word demon for that matter, because this is something people misunderstand all the bloody time. The word demon, as many people know, comes from the Greek daemon. D-A-I-M-O-N is one of about 6 different valid spellings I've seen over the years. Now, when a lot of people think of the word daemon, they think of, well, that's just a word for a god, or that's the word for a spirit that could be good or evil, or it's just another word for an evil spirit like Christians think. And which one's the correct original answer? All 3 of them are actually technically correct if you go back to the original Greek sources. If you go back to Homer, he talks about demons, or daemons I should say, being gods. It's pretty much a word he uses intermixed with the word deity throughout the Iliad and the Odyssey with no special other meaning attached to it. Now, on the other hand, if you ask Aristotle, they were spirits. They were spirits of inspiration. In fact, he claimed to have a daemon that advised him. They could be good, they could be evil. Now, some of the later Greek philosophers, particularly a guy by the name of Xenocrates, started to suggest the idea that there was this order of spirits that was actively opposing the gods. And that was what he was calling daemons. That's more or less why the Christian Bible uses the term, or at least the alteration of the term into the word demon. Now, the word devil has a more appropriate meaning. It comes from the Greek diabolos, and diabolos means the worst, or the slanderer or the accuser. Now, in Hebrew, the name Satan comes from Ha-Satan. Ha-Satan means the slanderer or the accuser, which refers to the fact that in Hebrew scriptures, Satan is more of a prosecuting attorney than the enemy of God that most Christians think of him as being. So the Hebrew means slanderer or accuser. The Greek means slanderer or accuser. People often connect it to the Sanskrit, which is deva. And in Sanskrit, the word deva actually means angel, basically. Where that's probably not where Christianity got it. The Bible comes from the Greek. Originally it was written in Greek, not Sanskrit. On the other hand, there's
Hebrew.
What?
Well, part of it was Hebrew.
Well, yeah, part of it was but the New Testament, which is where the word
New
devil
Testament,
first
yeah.
appears. But thank you for keeping me honest.
That's why I'm here.
But on the other hand, what's interesting is there's another religion which was prominent in Persia at the time of Christ, which is called Zoroastrianism. In Zoroastrianism, devas are demons. The words are just about interchangeable. What's also sort of funny here is in Hinduism, the word Ashura means a demon. In Zoroastrianism, Asuras are the angels, Devas are the demons. The two reverse each other, which is almost deliberately a deliberate, thing on both on the Zoroastrian side. These are much younger. Of haha, your things are evil. People always think of Christians doing that, and it's perfectly fair. But what the people don't necessarily understand is everybody does that.
Yeah.
All through history, one culture's demons become the next culture's gods. One culture's gods become demons, back and forth, up and down, left and right.
That actually kind of reminds me of to validate that a little bit, it reminds me of a folkloric thing in like China.
Mm-hmm.
The word Shen means, can mean God, spirit, demon. The Japanese have the kami, which are also spirits and can be good or evil.
Good or evil, yeah.
So you get a lot of that where, depending on how it's translated, you have accounts where the Chinese will be talking about demons or whatever, and what they're actually saying is ghosts or whatever, but it's all these meanings wrapped into one word. So I totally see.
And Brian's absolutely right.
Of course, the Eastern Asian tends to blend things a lot more than we tend to like.
Yeah, any of you out there who watch anime, by the way,
Oh boy.
probably have noticed the weird way that certain things get translated. And it's like, wait, they're calling it an angel in the English translation, but it's acting more like a demon. It's like, well, yeah, it's because the word, like he was saying, the word kami, which is what they probably originally used, can mean both for all intents and purposes.
Yeah, it's kind of an all-encompassing term. And then what's worse is when those cultures borrow things from like Western culture, they take legends and they start to mix in, and you start to find things
Weird.
Yeah, and it just all gets put together into this like jambalaya of folklore.
Yeah, and it's aside from the fact that I'm a practical demonologist, I have a fascination with folklore. And the evolution of folklore is really interesting. For example, there's a movie that just came out on Netflix. I have not seen it yet, although I've seen the original series, called Death Note, about, among other things, a being from Japanese folklore called the Shimigami. Now, how is that?
Shinigami.
Okay, Shinigami. In Japanese folklore, Shinigami is basically the Grim Reaper. How close is it to the Grim Reaper? Well, the Shinigami isn't a creature originally native to Japan. When Japan first got the idea of the Grim Reaper from European culture, that's where the Shinigami comes from.
Yeah.
They're literally just Japanese Grim Reapers.
But honestly, if you look at any of the reviews, I was just gonna say, if you look at any of the reviews, you should just avoid the Netflix movie.
Yeah, I haven't. That would be why I haven't watched it yet.
To be fair, the guy playing L and the guy playing Ryu, they do a good job in their roles. It's just the script has problems.
That's about all I've heard good about. Like, I haven't heard a single.
Now, the original anime was awesome.
That's what people say, but the new one, they just say it just butchers everything.
It butchers it. It really focuses on the wrong things, like, oh, you like this whole huge chess game between these two super geniuses on opposing sides? Well, forget that. We need more horror elements and slow-mo death scenes.
So, one of the other common questions I get, because again, I've been doing this for 20 years. There's a lot of questions I get asked a million times. I'm going to try to answer a couple of the basic ones right off the bat. So one of them is, where do demons come from? Now, the obvious joke here...
Well, when a mommy demon and a daddy demon love each other very, very much... Or hate each other very much. No, yeah.
And this is why I invited Brian on. That's exactly what I was about to say.
I'm the comic relief. Yeah.
But the smart comic relief. So, in Christianity, and other religions have their own theories. But I'm a Christian, so I'm going to talk mostly about the Christian side of things at the moment. There are three major theories. Now, the first one's the one everyone out there has probably heard of because it's the one all the movies use, which is that Lucifer was an angel, an archangel, or actually the Bible calls him a cherub, and rebelled against God for some reason. And there's more.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but as soon as you call him a cherub, that just changed The whole way I picture Lucifer. Now he's like a little baby with wings going. And it's just awesome. Now somebody has to make a movie about
that. Okay, we'll come back to that in a minute because there's something worth saying about the actual nature of cherubim.
I know, and I know cherubs don't actually look like that, but it's too funny.
And as a point of technical correctness, cherubs is not linguistically correct. The plural of cherub is cherubim. I am in Hebrew means plural. Just to throw a little bit of random knowledge at y'all. But so basically, Lucifer rebels usually because he wants to be God. Sometimes because he's jealous of the position of man. Although that's a more common theory among Muslims, is that basically God tells the angels and the jinn to bow before Adam, and what's his name, Iblis, later to be known as Satan, goes, "No, I won't bow before anyone but God. All glory is yours." And that's why the jinn become, some of the jinn at least, become evil. But basically, angels fall, and you can find this in Book of Revelation, chapter 12, verse 7, where it talks about the war in heaven between Satan and Michael. But then there's the other two theories, which is where things get weird. The next one relates to Genesis chapter 6, verse 4, which talks about the sons of God who lust after the daughters of men. What does that mean? Well, one Jewish theory, which you will find primarily in the Book of Enoch, although it appears in some of the rabbinical and in the Apocrypha, yes, in the Kabbalistic literature, is that the sons of God were angels who rebelled against God because they fell in love with human women, had children with those women, and those children then became these superhuman beings we know as the Nephilim. The word Nephilim means fallen in Hebrew. And the Bible talks about them a couple of times. They also are called the Anakim. One of the most prominent times they show up after the flood is that Goliath was one of the Anakim. So the reason he was so huge was that he had at least some angel blood in him somewhere along the line. Then the third theory gets even weirder. So we all know the story of the Garden of Eden. God created the world in 6 days, Adam and Eve, so on and so forth. If you pick up your Bible sometime, start with Genesis chapter 1, which talks about God creating the heavens and the earth, and talks about God creating man and woman. And then chapter 2 is the story of the Garden of Eden. Now, the simplest explanation for this is that the scripture in particular tends to repeat a story twice, and the second time it tells it in greater detail. But there's an old theory in Judaism that, no, there was two creations. The first creation was of these non-human beings that were still sentient like we are, but these beings were so wicked, God destroyed them all and started over again. Now, in this theory, the spirits of these creatures that came from before us, those are your demons. And then there's even, Christians sometimes accept these two theories as well. Personally, for my part, I primarily believe the first one. As I said, I do believe that there were these half-breeds I mentioned, but I think that by the point that they were created, the angels had already fallen. I tend to think that the beings that were here before the Garden of Eden were probably angels. Although, and this is I think a show unto itself. And I've been meaning to address this because I used to have a YouTube series besides this, but there's this whole argument that's really big right now between the idea of creation in literal 6 days or evolution. And I'm actually in the third camp, which is what we call theistic evolution, which says God created the heavens and the earth, God created life, evolution and the Big Bang is the how.
Which makes sense. I mean, you assume if God created everything, he also created the mechanics by which it was going to, everything didn't have to just magically pop into existence.
Exactly.
It got here through a natural process. So that to me is the most sensible.
If you stop and think about it, how chaotic would things be if it just popped into existence without creating rules and boundaries of what it can and can't do?
Well, especially for me as a Christian, I have two particular concepts that are at play here. One is that I believe in a God of rules, order, and structure, which means that I believe that God created a universe that works by natural laws that we can understand, and science is the process of understanding those laws. Now, like I said, it's an episode in and of itself. But there's a titanic amount of scientific evidence out there for both evolution and the Big Bang. So it seems to me, at least, that we have two options. One is to assume that God created the universe with massive amounts of evidence to fool us for some reason.
Just
I don't believe in a dishonest God. I'll just say that right now. Or that something else is going on here. And the thing is, if you read St. Augustine of Hippo, who's one of the most important earlier philosophers in Christianity, or Origen, who's another very important philosopher and a strong defender of Christianity against some of the early heresies, both of them said that you shouldn't take the book of Genesis as actual literal 6 days. But like I said, I don't want to disrespect other people's faith. I'm not here to judge people. That's
well,
just
from what
why
I
I
understand,
sit on it.
the whole 40 days and 40 nights isn't literal. It was an old-time expression that meant a really long time. It wasn't like somebody sat there with a watch and timed it, okay, exactly 40 days it rained,
Exactly.
Just thinking now of the comedian Danny Boy and how the news of the flood probably didn't go over well in Scotland. It's going to rain for 40 days and 40 nights. We're on day 60 here.
Yeah, exactly. There are places it rains, 100 days a year.
And wow, we're almost to 7 o'clock already.
Yeah.
So this is going well.
It flies.
I'm sorry, what was that?
It flies.
Yeah?
And time does fly.
So-
In case anybody's wondering, I'm his fiance. I am not Christian. Basically, I think things develop independently on their own, and usually geographically developed independently. All religions are true in at least some sense. And there are the fairies, and then there are the demons, and sometimes they intermingle.
And just for variety, I'm more or less what you'd call an open-minded agnostic. I don't have firm convictions either way. I believe in science, and I tend to trust, things that have evidence behind them. I'm interested in folklore, and I give a certain amount of respect and possibility to all the world's religions, because I think it's, everybody works with what they've got. But yeah, I don't have any really strong beliefs, so we've got a little fun triad here.
And this is also part of why I invited the two of them on, is I can keep, as they can tell you, I can keep going for hours.
Yes.
But I'm one perspective on things, and I think it's better to get a little bit of variety. And since we've got a pagan and we've got an agnostic, it gives a little more depth to what's going on. We are coming up on our first half hour. I do think it's a good time to mention that if anybody is out there listening and wants to call in, we do have a phone number for that. It's 609-807-2492. We're certainly not going to shut up. I thought we'd give you guys the offer if anybody wants to call. If you got questions, if you got comments, one thing I've learned doing these talks, just about everybody out there has had one weird experience. They've always wanted to ask somebody about what does this mean.
Right.
Feel free. Let me repeat that number again. 609-807-2492.
The voice of professionalism.
I'm very dense about nonverbal signals, so that you guys know. But
operators are standing by.
And keep in mind, if you get bored of listening to the three of us, we do have guests coming up as well.
Yes, it's not all going to be like
Guest
this.
Palooza is coming up.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's going to be. We've got some really awesome people coming up very soon, and I'm hyper excited about it. And we'll have plenty of times when we'll just keep rambling. If you guys seem to like listening to us, that works too.
Hey, I'm learning a lot, so
I didn't want to
good.
comment real quick. If anybody is going to call in to ask a question, I do want to set a couple of quick ground rules I have for this kind of thing, just because it's happier and healthier, in my opinion, to handle things this way. So the basic ground rule here is if you ask me to comment on somebody else's paranormal investigation group or somebody else's religion, I will probably turn you down flat. This is for a couple of reasons. One, I don't like bad-mouthing people, especially people I don't know. And I have a degree of respect for all religion. And two, the paranormal community can be worse than Washington sometimes in terms of the irritating politics. My mentor Lou did enjoy getting into the controversy quite a lot more than I do. I prefer to avoid it. There are groups I will certainly mention, but if you ever hear me mention a group on here, it's either a really, really good group that I respect what they're doing, or it's really, really bad. Because there are a few groups out there that are just so terrible, somebody's got to say something. And even then, most of the time, I'll comment, like there's this one group I can think of that is obsessed with pictures of dust. Called
Dustbusters.
Called International Ghost Hunter Society. I don't even know how active.
Now I'm just thinking of a Ghostbusters parody where they're
Exactly,
all
just guys with like.
But for those of you who are wondering what I'm talking about, if you look in your friendly local Barnes and Noble or online, you'll find books and pictures and movies about this phenomenon, and I put that in quotes, called orbs. Orbs are little circles of light that appear in photographs and on video. Now, the true believers in orbs will tell you that orbs are ghosts or demons or whatever. They're spirits. Anyone who has a basic background in photography will tell you they're dust or moisture in the air or snow or rain or insects or pollen or any one of a million other things. I'm not a big believer in the orb phenomenon. That isn't to say there's never, ever, ever been a case of an orb I've seen that I didn't think might have had something to it. It's, there's a sliding scale of legitimacy in paranormal evidence to me, and orbs are pretty close to the bottom of the barrel.
And there was that one picture some lady showed us where it looked like a bouncing ball in motion.
Yes,
like
and
the actual motion that you could see.
Wow.
Which is, like I said, there are times that I have to go, okay, maybe there's something there.
Okay, so I have a topic for you, a quick one while we're waiting for a potential caller. Give us your best story of a time when an investigation turned out to be, totally not supernatural. Like, what was one of the? You mentioned a couple things, but what was the best or funniest one?
I actually haven't had a whole lot of investigations I personally did that turned out to be nothing, because a lot of the time, especially because lately I've been more on the education side of things instead of investigation, just because of real life gets in the way. I don't get paid to hunt ghosts. I get paid to work a regular 9-to-5 job. But I'll tell you my favorite story from a friend of mine.
Okay.
You two have heard this story, and it's one of the three I alluded to. So I have a friend who just passed away, unfortunately, who lived in Texas, who was an investigator. And she gets asked to investigate this house that is literally across the street from her. Now, it's San Antonio, which is not necessarily the best city in the world, in the country. And it's a bad part of town, and it's at night, and there's nobody living there. So for lots of very obvious and practical reasons, she decides she should, a young woman shouldn't go there by herself. And we'll get into it at some point, but a lot of the things you see ghost hunters do in terms of, well, why are they always doing investigations at night? There's a practical reason 9 times out of 10. Like, for example, you want to know why we do investigations more at night than anything else? It's because we all work regular jobs, and the people whose house we investigate work regular jobs nights when most people are off. You can get paranormal phenomenon during the day. It's just most people have to go to work to earn the money to make a living. But at any rate, she goes to a friend of hers who's a former Navy SEAL. And at the time was search and rescue, paramedic, pretty tough guy, who wanted to go into haunted houses. Now, this apartment that they're going into, they've been told by the owners that somebody had been murdered there. So every time the owners try to rent it out, since people run out, they can't deal with it. They don't stay more than a night or two. They go in the front door, they hear weird noises coming from somewhere below. Now, my friend's reaction, and the proper reaction, is, okay, let's figure out what's going on. I mean, it wasn't like people talking, it was just creepy noises. The Navy SEAL's reaction is to turn around, run out the door, and run all the way home, screaming like a little girl. Now, my friend finds out what's actually going on. There are raccoons living underneath the house. Now, raccoons make some really disturbing noises. You know, they scream, they do all sorts of weird things. There's nothing paranormal about it.
Are we sure they weren't demonic raccoons?
Well, you never know. But so she goes home to tell the owners, okay, just call the pest control, they'll deal with it. And a little while later, she sees police lights out in the street. Turns out Mr. Navy SEAL went and called the cops and told them the house had eaten her.
Just straight up.
You know, Lou had a case that he did out in the middle of Pennsylvania, up in the mountains. It was a good 2.5 hour drive each way for the poor guy, where this woman was insisting that she had a poltergeist in her house. And for those of you who don't know, poltergeist is German. It means noisy spirit. It's a type of phenomenon that is more objects flying around, weird noises and smells. You usually don't see a spirit actually manifest in a poltergeist case. You do sometimes, but even then, it's usually more of a mist or an amorphous form instead of a figure. And he gets out there, and man, this house looks like it's got a poltergeist. It's a wreck. You know, furniture upended, stuff broken, bite marks and claw marks on things. But Lou, and for that matter myself, neither of us has ever been by any means psychic. But 20 years in the business, and Lou had been doing it longer than I've been doing it even now. When you walk into a house that has a spirit in it, it's got a feel to it. You can usually kind of get a sense pretty quick. And this house, he ain't feeling it. And this woman starts explaining all of this weird paranormal phenomenon that's supposedly happening, and she's into the weirdest ends of the New Age spectrum, talking about I kid you not, koala bears wearing army helmets that are coming to visit her and things like that. It's like, and her friends
UFO abductions.
Yeah. Her friend's totally into it too.
Well, UFOs are not quite as weird as koalas in armor.
That's my next book.
Time traveling koalas in our military helmets.
Koala bears in military helmets. That's my
that
next
were some
book.
sort of time guardians or something.
Oh my god, that's awesome.
So finally, she's like, "Well, I have a recording of the spirit voices I can play for you." EVP, electronic voice phenomenon, is an audio recording of a spirit voice. Lou was the high king of EVP. He got them everywhere. At some point in the future, we're actually going to do EVP live on the air and see what happens. But he'd heard hundreds of them. He listens to this. EVP, and anyone who's heard it, you watch those ghost shows or documentaries and things like that, you'll hear it all the time. It's pretty common. But it has a certain quality to the voice. Even in the clear ones, there's a certain quality to the voice. This one is really weird sounding, but it sounds more like this. So he looks at the recorder and realizes it's in slow play. And what's actually on the recorder is her yelling at the real cause of the devastation in her home, which is the fact the woman owns 2 large, badly behaved dogs. But Lou finally washes his hands of the whole thing and goes home because, lady, come on. But as far as I know, to this day, that woman may still be convinced that her house is haunted because she wanted a haunted house. She did not want dogs that were causing her problems. And there's also that typical thing you get with some pet owners of, oh no, my precious babies wouldn't do that.
Despite her yelling at them.
Yeah.
Well, if you've ever owned dogs, you know that yes, they will do that.
Especially if you get them very recently and they're very nervous.
Well, yeah. There's a period where it takes a while for them to break in. That's why a lot of times you put them in, a room or a large,
You don't let them
crate
run
or
around your house
something.
all day. Basically.
Yeah, alone because they're gonna get separation anxiety. They're gonna have problems.
Yeah, dogs are very social. And this sort of stuff happens all the time. There isn't an investigator on the planet. We'll have to ask the investigators we've got coming on. And it's like, what are some of your funniest known ghost stories? And there are other stories that were less funny, but still kind of cool. I mean, I had a woman contact me who was terrified her daughter was possessed by a demon. And, I'm corresponding with her on email, and she explains to me that her daughter has a psychiatric disorder called PMDD, which is incredibly severe mood swings. It's a bit, I'm not by no means a psychiatrist, but as friends of mine who are therapists explain it to me, it's sort of like PMS on steroids. When you hear the stories of a woman on PMS who killed her husband, no, that's not normal PMS. That's this.
Yeah.
And her mom knew this, but her daughter was so angry about religion and the medication that her daughter on wasn't doing anything for her. And I just said to her, look, ma'am, with all due respect, I think your daughter is having a problem with her disorder. You're not describing anything paranormal. I would advise that you talk to her psychiatrist and see about changing her medications and see what he thinks you should do before you get me involved. And the reality is she ignored me for the next 6 months, but eventually told me, yep, that was it, all there was to it. Because the thing you'll learn, and if there are any skeptics out there, I'm sure some of you are thinking this, is that, yeah, there's a lot of this stuff that has a natural explanation. And they're not mutually exclusive. There are cases where the person is a little off the rocker, but still has a spirit in their house. But, there are times, and since this is the first show, and I did admittedly just speak about all this the other week when I was on Jerry's show, but it bears repeating that there are times where this stuff is real, and there is the one case I did where this guy was having all these horrible experiences with creatures walking around him on the bed, poking, pinching, prodding, hands underneath his skin, pulling his hair. And, people can say, oh, it's just in his imagination, but there's two things to that. One is that all the stuff that I just described as happening to him happened to his wife. He didn't believe her. The priest she went to didn't believe her. The psychiatrist she went to didn't believe her. That woman got pushed so far by all of that phenomenon, she put a gun in her mouth and pulled the trigger. The next night, everything she describes starts happening to him, which everything I've said up to now could be explained. And I acknowledge that, except for one detail. I sat in that house. We set up a video camera in his bedroom while we sat in the other room with a monitor on a cable so we could watch the feed. And he complains that the entities are there and that bed starts to move. I don't mean like it shakes up and down. I mean very small depressions walking across the bed, like something maybe the size of a house cat. There's two problems with this house cat. One is it's only 2 feet moving. It's something that's bipedal like we are, but the size of a house cat. The other problem is the bed's moving. What's moving isn't visible on the recording, just the fact that it's moving. Last I checked, it is not possible to record mental illness like that. You cannot videotape delusion. Now, there's the other side of this, which is that people would probably point out that what I am saying is anecdotal evidence, which is the lowest form of scientific evidence. And I acknowledge that as well. So here's my point. I'm not going to claim that I can prove the existence of these things. If I could, I'd probably have a Nobel Prize by now. I mean, that would change our understanding of science on such a fundamental level. But for the people who are having these experiences, it's very real. For that woman, it was real enough for her to shoot herself in the head. And she saw a psychiatrist, and she was on medications. It didn't help. I don't want to see another woman die. As a life goal, I would like to never see a case get that bad ever again. So that's why, at the end of the day, I don't care that much about proving it to all of you. Because, there's also an old saying, that to a believer, there's more than enough evidence. To a skeptic, there never will be enough. I mean, I could take a skeptic out into a house, and there are houses I've done, and there are places in this country that I could take a skeptic out there, and I can make a believer out of you. Easy. Why? What good? Skeptics are like, well, then you have a more objective. Da, 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 da. It's like, and how does in the ultimate long-term goal of getting a priest involved? Because keep in mind, I am a layperson. I am not a Catholic priest. I do not, obviously I'm engaged. I do not have the authority to perform an exorcism. I'm the one who gets enough evidence together to convince a priest to get involved. My goal is that. If you're not, the fact that you're a skeptic isn't necessarily going to help sway them, because if you see it, you're not really going to be a skeptic anymore. And I'm not saying I would never take a skeptic out. I have done it before. I will do it. Would consider doing it again. But for the most part, it doesn't serve the ultimate purpose I'm trying to do here. And more fundamentally, I don't. There's lots of ghost groups, and I am by no means disrespecting these types of groups. They go out and do prisons and psychiatric hospitals and inns and all sorts of other abandoned places that have paranormal phenomena. And that's wonderful. But to me, that's not what I do, because I'm trying to help people who have a problem. And if nobody lives there, it's not a problem. Maybe that abandoned psychiatric hospital has Satan himself on standby. He shows up once a night and dances a jig. Maybe I could videotape that.
That'd be awesome.
But if he's just dancing a jig in an empty insane asylum where nobody's even seeing it, I don't care.
And doesn't make a sound.
Yeah. There's a few places. There's places. I mean, that friend of mine in Texas, when she was a kid, she did a church group in San Antonio. And she did it through the summer, and they'd stay in a hotel, and they'd walk from the hotel to the place that they were having a church group and back. When they get to the Alamo, they went to the other side of the street and then crossed back. Why? Because from time to time at night, people walking past the Alamo can still hear gunshots. That's the thing I'll run into. People don't want to believe in the paranormal, but you'd be surprised how many people who claim not to believe in it are still afraid of it. Let me give my listeners an example. If there are any skeptics out there who are having a good chuckle, that's cool. I welcome anyone. You want to listen, or you even want to call in, you're welcome to it. But if you really don't believe there's such a thing, tonight, when you wake up, late at night, probably around 3 a.m, because lots of people do, it's a biorhythm thing, and you wake up and your foot's dangling off the edge of that bed, leave it. Or sleep, for the next week, sleep with your closet door open. The late demonologist Ed Warren, who is a really remarkable individual, we'll be talking at length more about him in the future, but Ed had a saying: nobody believes in ghosts, but everybody's afraid of them. Lots of people, there are people listening to me, the law of averages, or who will listen in the future, that don't believe a word I'm saying. But I seriously wonder how many of you will let that foot dangle in the night, or will sleep with the closet door open. Or for that matter, would spend a night alone in a haunted house. And it's a funny thing, because I've talked to people who are like, I don't believe in ghosts. It's like, well, would you spend a night alone in a haunted house? Heck no. It's like, but you don't believe in ghosts. Why won't you do it? It's a funny thing. And, Halloween's coming up. And even if you don't believe it, it's fun to talk about. I think everybody loves to hear ghost stories.
Not me.
Says the guy who writes vampire fiction.
Right. Exactly. I draw the line at vampires. I don't do ghosts.
And what were you working on with the ghost story? The ghost story with vampires you wanted advice on again?
I did want to incorporate. I did want to try to incorporate ghosts into one of my stories, and I was asking you for like some practical information that could help me and some ideas like from your experience. I'm still getting that. That's half the reason I'm here is to mine Kevin's experiences for novel ideas.
Someone wants to know, what is the Invisible Man spirit?
Is the Invisible Man a spirit?
Or is it just something that Hollywood cooked up, as we were talking to Brian earlier? A lot of
You mean
stuff
like
was just...
the H.G. Wells?
Yeah, the original
Invisible
H.G.
Man?
Wells.
I don't know. They're just asking, is the Invisible Man a spirit? Is that how they decided to make
That's
an Invisible Man?
It's an interesting question. See, a
Well,
lot
I
of
think that really depends on what they mean by the
the original
They-
Victorian
It's a,
era
it's
novel.
a generic type of thing. It's,
Well, it's originally a novel from H.G. Wells, was it?
Yeah. I think the idea behind that was Wells was exploring the idea of if you became invisible, like literally, invisible, what would that do to you as a person? Because what ends up happening is it drives the character's name is Griffin, that the scientist that comes up with this serum that causes him to become transparent. And it eventually affects his mind and drives him mad because he can no longer see himself. He no longer gets the reaction from other people. He, in essence, starts to doubt his own existence because he no longer has anyone else to kind of validate that he's just this disembodied voice now. And he starts committing, criminal acts and whatnot.
You made me think.
question,
Yeah.
just before you go answer. Is that like a spirit? Now, understand my question. Understand my question, because I think you do.
Yeah.
Is that like a spirit that's trying to get attention, as we always say, the spirit's trying to get attention because they're not being heard or seen? And that's a good point you made, Brian.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, that's a great point that Brian makes. So that's a really good question that you have. So this is one of the reasons I love doing talks and doing radios and things like that, is I get some of the coolest and most interesting questions that I'd never think of on my own. So let me address the Invisible Man thing, and then I'll get to your question, which is very good. There is a philosopher, it was Plato or Aristotle, it was one of the big Greek philosophers, I forget which one, who wrote a story about a man who found a ring that turned him invisible. And because of the fact he's now invisible, no one else can see him, he can't look at, he doesn't have to look himself in the mirror, he turns into this monster.
Yeah, he becomes capable of anything.
I would take, I've researched like the origins of Frankenstein and Dracula and Jekyll and Hyde and a bunch of the other Victorian stories. And by the way, for the record, it's Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, not Jekyll. It's a common mispronunciation. And we can talk about all that, and it's fun. But I haven't researched the Invisible Man too much. My educated guess is it's probably exploring the same theme that the philosopher was talking back thousands of years ago.
Almost all of Wells's science fiction was based in exploring social or political ideas. He was very active. He was a socialist long before it was cool. He had a lot of. He was a feminist actually, much longer, way before it was fashionable.
Well, we all know that he was actually a woman.
Yeah, all
That's
news
if you-
runners
yes.
everywhere, no matter what, are women.
Well, no, the
But,
TV series Warehouse 13 actually played with.
Jamie.
The writer
Yes.
was actually H.G. Wells as we think of him, but his sister Helena was actually like the scientist who did all the crazy things he wrote about.
Okay, I never saw that, but
It's a good show.
I got into H.G. Wells was
Yeah.
one of the first authors that I got into when I was a kid.
Mhm.
I started reading him in like middle school and high school, and it got me into science fiction. But yeah, his some of his original
To get back
stuff is
to your
really
question, though, because it was a good question.
Yeah.
I think you have a point. With humans, human spirits, in my experience, are not generally malevolent. There are exceptions, but a lot of them, it's more of a matter of they want attention. I mean, the two of the biggest ways to tell the difference between a human spirit haunting and demonic haunting is in the amount of power that it has and how it reacts if they scare you. You know, if a ghost scares you, it will probably stop because it just wants attention. And when you freak out and go, "Oh my gosh, I have a ghost," job done. It got the attention it wants. But a demon will ramp things up and it'll get worse. Now, I think part of why ghosts do what they do is that desire for attention. But I certainly do believe that there are ghosts out there that are like, I'm invisible. I can just do this now. I mean, because who out there, of the three of us, who's considered, or the four of us for that matter, who of us is considered who'd we haunt if we became a ghost?
I haven't thought about haunting, but I have definitely given serious thought to what would I do if I could turn invisible.
Yeah.
That's one of those things that it's
one of those thought experiments just about everybody goes through at some point in their life.
You can learn a lot about somebody by asking them if they could have any superpower, like what would it be? You find out a lot about what drives that person and what their
flight's popular, invisibility's popular.
Yeah.
Mine is always flight by broomstick. Yeah, specifically by broomstick. I think the movie Kiki's Delivery Service always influenced me on that.
It's a good movie. How about you, Brian? If you could pick one superpower.
This is gonna really.
I get the best answer ever.
This is kind of embarrassing, but for me, it's mind control. If I could make other people do what I want, like Professor Xavier style.
No, those are both good choices. But I'm going to give everybody out there in the studio
control freak.
the correct answer to the question of what superpower would you want if you could have any superpower. I want omnipotence.
Well, yeah, but where's the fun in that? Because then
you can do everything. You can figure out how to do everything else.
Well, yeah, if you become omnipotent, the idea then I guess is either with omnipotence you either become so transcendent and above, like sort of Dr. Manhattan and Watchmen.
Yeah.
You become so distant that you don't do anything fun anymore. You just sit around like contemplating the universe.
I can imagine a head exploding because of just how much information is going by you every nanosecond.
If you want to get realistic, I mean, the physics of the power of flight don't end well.
Oh no. Well, that's why it's a superpower. Is you assume that there's some kind of magic
that makes it work out.
Well, it's like the Flash. Realistically, the Flash should just burst into an explosion every time he takes off running.
And if he does it, the air around him,
he's a streaking comet.
Yeah.
And the man can run literally faster than the speed of light.
There's actually a great YouTube series. I think it's called Because Science.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, and he actually pointed out that in the comics, Wonder Woman's sword, the God Killer, should actually have lightning every time it moves.
Because the way he worked it out and the way that she describes it, it can cut between the strands of a DNA helix. That's pretty bloody impressive. But the way that would affect the atmosphere, it's lightning and thunder every time you swipe. Which is actually really awesome superpower when you think about it.
I've seen so many videos where they went into like the unintended consequences of like everything Superman does, and it's just like Superman would be the biggest natural disaster for the planet just by existing. Like the first time he took off, he's rupturing continents and stuff. Just doing the math takes all the fun out of Superman.
No, I will say
a lot of things take the fun out of superheroes.
And math ruins everything.
I've tried to get him before, but if we could land Kyle Hill, the guy who does Because Science, I'd love to do an interview with him. Because the thing that he does that's cool, and it's worth checking out on YouTube, is it's like, well, how could this work? And trying to figure out the math and the
I would
physics.
love to find out the physics or potential physics of how a ghost could exist and do what it does.
He's
without
done a couple
having
on ghosts,
mass.
believe it or not.
Okay.
And that's a good question.
Yeah, because by definition, normally ghosts don't have any kind of mass. They don't have any sort of real physical presence. So either they're doing everything by some sort of telekinesis or they're, like I said, they're made up of some substance that we don't actually understand.
Well, I tend to favor the telekinesis theory. I suppose in terms of physics, and I'm probably about to talk out of my posterior because I am by no means a physicist. But there is a theory that's getting regular prominence that people tend to think of there's matter and energy, but apparently that's wrong. There's energy and energy.
Oh yeah, energy is
different.
Matter, it's just it's
different states of energy, and it's like maybe there's another state of energy that includes this is.
So I'm thinking like quantum
Yeah.
quantum foam that they call it
Yeah.
that underlies our reality.
Yeah. And we have Arthur on. He talks a lot about some of his experiences because Arthur's a magician. You know, he deals in magic powers, and he's had some experiences with like parallel worlds or stuff, as he's told me. And he's been dying to sit down with a quantum physicist and just go, okay, does this what I'm experiencing match up at all with the actual science?
Mhm.
And that's actually, for that matter, if I knew any quantum physicists, I'd totally put the two of them together. And probably trying to get them on the show because I think it'd probably be fascinating. It'd go right over my head because, again,
Yeah.
physics is not my, the thing is, I'm a bit of a one-trick pony. I've been doing this 20 years and I've spent so much time focused on it. You need a lot of time and discipline to learn physics or biology. I haven't had that much time.
No. What I've done, what I could recommend for you is like there are a couple of books that I have by Mikio Kaku, who is a very famous physicist. You see him on Discovery Channel and the science things all the
I think
time.
I know who he is.
Yeah, he more than anybody else whose books I read, he does a fantastic job of breaking down all of these theories into sort of layman's terms that make it easily digestible and stuff. He uses metaphor very well. He explains things in a way where suddenly it's like, oh, that's not
Now
so
it makes sense.
complicated. Yeah, and what was also really cool was early on I got into I read a book called The Tao of Physics, which was fantastic, where it talked about where all these places where sort of Eastern mysticism and the current theories of quantum physics really sort of match up, like, explained in a different way, but yeah, this whole like, chi energy or key energy and this, that, the other thing, that really kind of mimics what we talk about when we talk about how quantum particles work and this and that. It was like, I was reading this, I'm like, this is awesome.
Did you have a question?
Yeah, by the way, a friend of mine, Kenneth Dahl, used to be on here. I think I set him up with you. He's a real great guy. He knows about a lot of that stuff.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I started talking with him.
He's an awesome guy. He was a co-host for the other guy that passed away, that was writing books. I have a question. They say, according to Hollywood, how close are some of the movies to what you're talking about, like Ghost? What are they saying?
Ghost is 100% accurate.
Yeah,
you can't mess with Whoopi Goldberg.
Okay,
I think they're alluding to like Patrick Swayze and
the
movements of all the ghosts and how they move, how he learned to move things through energy, pushing things. That's what they're alluding to, and
That's
also
really
paranormal, like different other
the million movies.
Poltergeist as well.
Okay,
They're asking the two movies.
This is definitely a show on itself, and we'll revisit it. But let me give a couple quick opinions. Not having been a ghost, I can't comment too much on Patrick Swayze's training montage, as it were. It seems kind of in the ballpark from what little I know, but again, I'm not a ghost, nor am I a medium, so I have no idea. Although I do love that movie. Now, in terms of Poltergeist, as I understand it, was actually loosely based on an actual case. And I don't know of any actual cases where somebody, like, crossed into the spirit world and came back in a physical body sense. Like, there are people that astrally project and they send their soul in the spirit world and come back. And I've even heard of first-hand accounts of people who had to go rescue somebody who got trapped on the other side spiritually, but their body doesn't cross over like that. And that very well may be the case. Maybe it was some sort of astral projection thing, and the people who made the movie just thought the whole thing was too weird and decided to turn it into a much more literal portal type of sense.
I heard Steven Spielberg originally got the idea from a nightmare that he had.
Very common with horror movies.
Yeah,
And,
I'm guessing it's the part with the clown under the bed. Oh my God! I saw that movie when I was a kid. I still am afraid to look under my bed, thinking that there's going to be a freaking clown under there.
Funny fact for everyone, and people are always wondering what scares the demonologist. I'm like the one guy in the world that's not afraid of clowns at all. I actually like clowns because I'm I'm a magician. I'm into that whole kind of thing. I
Oh
think
no,
they're
I'm not.
awesome.
I'm not scared of regular clowns. I'm scared of that clown. That particular.
Piggyback to that question too. I want to ask: how often do rocking chairs just rock by themselves?
Pretty often. I've had it happen in my house.
Yeah, there's a lot of natural explanations as to why that.
Well, that's
can
what
be.
they're
Yeah.
asking.
But yeah, that's pretty common.
But you said the Conjuring movies were also very
yes.
pretty accurate.
So moving up in time frame a little, there is, of course, The Exorcist. Now, The Exorcist is based on a real case that happened in St. Louis, Missouri. I'm not going to get into great detail about that case, but there's a reason why I'm waiting. There's a guy I had on when I was doing YouTube by the name of Stephen Lancaster, who wrote, Stephen LaChance. Lancaster's another guy I need to contact about having on. And he did a phenomenal book called The Confrontation with Evil about the actual Exorcist case. Roland Doe was the name of the little boy. It's a phenomenal book. It'll blow. If you have any interest in like what really went on behind The Exorcist, go buy the book. It'll blow your bloody mind. It blew. I mean, I've been doing this a long time. I've talked to exorcists and demonologists and things like that. It blew mine. And we're gonna have him on. He's already said, yeah, he wants to do it. We're just trying to find a date, and we're getting toward closer. Okay, so once I wrap up this thought, I'll go into who we've got scheduled up for the next 3 weeks. Just give everybody a teaser to tune back in. But The Exorcist is actually very accurate. Everything you see in that movie, except the head spinning around, happens on cases. The main change is most of it doesn't happen altogether on the same case. That would be very bizarre. And the original Amityville Horror is actually pretty accurate. I've actually spoken to the Lutz family. We can talk more about that in the future. We don't have time to get into it now. And the original Conjuring and the second Conjuring are very accurate. Lorraine Warren, one of the two the only one of the couple the movie's based on that's still alive, did advise on that movie. They got things really dead on. And she's actually in the first Conjuring, funny enough. But okay, so we're going to be wrapping things up at this point, unfortunately. Let me give you a quick sneak peek at where we're going. So next week, again, Thursday, it'll be 6:30 to 7:30 on Thursday. We're going to have Karen Timmel Kipper. Do you know her? Am I getting your name right?
This is why you write things down. At least people's names so you can pronounce them correctly.
But for that matter, you guys can go to Paranormal Encyclopedia on YouTube. Or on YouTube. Well, you can do it on YouTube too, but on Facebook. And that's our fan page, and I'll be updating that with guests pretty regularly. And Karen, if you're listening, I apologize if I butchered your name. But anyway, she runs a very neat paranormal conference called Behind the Veil. That's going to be September 30th. Brian and I are both going to be there, as will Amisha for that matter. But we're going to be talking about that. She also does a traveling paranormal museum. We're going to be talking about that. Very nice lady, very interesting. Looking forward to talking to her. The week after that, we're going to have one of my personal favorite fantasy authors, which is a guy by the name of Patrick Thomas. To give you a quick tease, he writes a series called Murphy's Law, which is about a pub in New York called Bullfinch's, run by a leprechaun, where Hercules is the bouncer and Dionysus, the god of wine, is the bartender. As well as the other series of books about Nurgle, the chief of Hell's secret police.
Nice.
And then the week after that, which will be the first Thursday in October, we'll be having my friend John French on. John writes a series called Bianca Jones, which is about a Baltimore police detective who deals with the paranormal. So he's done stories about demons, vampires, all sorts of crazy stuff. John is also cool enough crime scene supervisor for the city of Baltimore. And then we've got a ton more people coming.
Even me.
Yeah, Brian. Well, I think you're going to be a pretty regular fixture at this point, Brian. I'm dragging you in.
But at one point,
We'll talk about it.
I'll actually be a guest, and I'll
Yeah.
get to plug my books, which are right here and beautiful and all available for sale on Amazon.
And they're good. They're worth reading.
Yes, thank you.
I think that's going to pretty much wrap it up for us tonight. I hope everybody enjoyed it. Like I said, look us up, Paranormal Encyclopedia on YouTube, and Facebook. And you can, send me messages there. I will get back to you usually within an hour or two. And if you think you have something weird going on in your house, feel free to email me. I'll try to help you. But that's it for me. Have a good night. Brian, you want to close? Have anything to say before we go?
No, thanks for listening. Like I said, if you like vampires, check my books out.
And if you don't, check them out anyway.
Yeah, well, if you like gangsters, check them out.
Yeah.
But I'll be here.
And honey?
Is that it?
That's it. Have a good night, everyone. See you next week.
Okay, you guys are clear.
Yay. Okay,
You are clear.
so that went very, very well.
I think so. Yeah.
Brian, consider